I'm filling in for Tina Peters because she is still 13 months later in prison, still on appeal, and despite that, she has not been granted bond.
Trump did something interesting. Let me just tell you what's going on. I am days away from signing an executive order.
Every state will probably have a RICO case because it is racketeering, and that's why they got Tina. They violated our constitutional rights, not only of our representative form of government.
If in all the clutter of a chess game, you're not paying close enough attention, if a pawn makes it all the way across to the other side, the pawn becomes themselves a queen. How many judges have recused themselves in this case so far?
We're on our 5th Article 3 judge.
All right, everyone, welcome back to The Truth Matters. My name is Apollo. You know that because you've seen me here a lot, and the reason is very simple. I'm filling in for Tina Peters because she is still now about 13 months later in prison, all for crimes that had on paper nothing to do with elections, and that is the narrative that they have continued to run with, that it was all about her misconduct and identity fraud and all kinds of things that completely betray the real reason Tina Peters did what she did, which was to make a backup of the Mesa County EMS. She was doing her duty, her sworn duty as the clerk and recorder of Mesa County. She preserved evidence. She was in accordance with federal and state law, still on appeal, and despite that, she has not been granted bond. She qualifies for all the qualifications for being released on bond under Colorado law, but despite letting out, sex offenders and those who are trafficking drugs like fentanyl, Tina Peters was deemed to be such a danger to the public because of her speech as it regards to elections. And this is one of the greatest travesties that we see as a civil rights violation, but also as a persecution of those who do their job to stand up for you, the American people, and the rule of law, and the very voice of America, which is the vote that we are supposed to have to elect our leaders. So if you can support Tina Peters, she really does need your help. You can do so at tinapeters.us. And I just ask everyone to pray that she is in fact released by Judge Verholic for this habeas track that is going on right now. We're hoping for a ruling by tomorrow so that she can simply be released on bond. And I just ask everyone to pray for her and her family, for her son. This will now be the second year that Tina Peters has spent in prison for Remington Peters' birthday, her fallen Navy SEAL son. And so this is a very hard time of year for her. So please pray for Tina. And then we have some amazing guests here as well today to talk about another front on elections where we have a wild story. You can go to utahcorruption.com to find 92 case filings plus additional information. And this has been put together by Tracie Halvorsen. She's here with me as well as Juan and Savin. So this one is a big story. I have to admit, I was taking chunks off of this, and there's a lot there. You've heard some of these details before, but I want to welcome Tracie and Juan to get into this, what she is pursuing as a class action lawsuit for the cabal in Utah. Again, someone fighting and doing a lot of work, an enormous amount of work, if you look at this case, for the people of Utah and for elections. So Tracie and, of course, 107, I want to thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's very fun. I'm actually excited about Tina's situation because the judge should have acted quite a long time ago, but hopefully acts tomorrow and takes some of the pressure off. But if the judge for any reason decides to hiccup, Trump did something interesting a few days ago. And I passed around the clip of it. He was being interviewed on stuff related to Ukraine, and a reporter asked him a question about the elections. And he said, well, it's kind of off topic, but, let me just tell you what's going on. And he says, I'm days away from signing an executive order concerning paper ballots and mail-in ballots. And then he proceeds to tell the audience that he's going to do that because the 2026 elections are coming up, and that you can't, we're not going to have mail-in ballots anymore. and we're not going to have paper ballots floating all over the place, loose. We're going to do a one-day vote. We're going to do it in person without this mail-in stuff, and only do it with paper ballots. I should say, not the electronic stuff. No machines. And by the way, let me just add this one little thing. Here's how serious he is about just doing it in person with a paper ballot. I had asked a group of people back, the day after the inauguration here on January 21st. We had a kind of a private meeting there in D.C. and had quite a number of people there together to talk about these things. And I'd asked a group of them who have expertise. They were capable of writing an executive order concerning not using machines in the coming election in accordance with what Trump had expressed as his interest wishes. And there was a proposed executive order that had been written the previous summer, which I'd seen, and I thought it was inadequate to the task. So I asked the team that I had there if they would put together a proposed version of executive order, what it should look like, how it should be worded, the whole schmear that could be used by the president, by the attorneys around the president, to compare with what they already had, to come up with something that was more comprehensive and dealt with all the issues that we had learned about over the last many years and understood, including the fact that we have the people in physical custody now. We didn't have them, but they were on their way, who actually stole the 2020 election. They're now in protected U.S. custody here on U.S. soil. So anyway, they prepared that. At the exact same time, I'd asked another group that had expertise into the way the electronics are used in the elections, the machines, if they would write a report concerning the use of anything electronic machines in the 2026 election. My questions were this: can the 2026 elections be run with the existing machine infrastructure for tallying votes, registering voters, all the aspects of machine use in the national election? Could they be trusted to be used? Well, the answer is no. And we have that from all sorts of disparate groups around the country for years, even back to the 90s, who have been looking at Smartmatic and Dominion and various other extrapolations of election machines in the vote and warning about their use. That there was no area of the electronics in the vote system that could be trusted for 2026. My second question was, is there a way to modify the existing machine system for conducting the election? All the various machines in the system, is there a way to modify them so that they can be used safely in the 2026 election, in the midterms? And the reality is, the answer to that is no. We have that again from numerous experts. But think about it, all the different groups, they have an area of expertise. They've got a perspective, but they're not, there's like no single voice there. There's no single area of continuity. It's all opinions of various experts, whether it's the algorithms that are used or the actual machinery or things that can be added to machinery. And so we have multiple sources, dozens, maybe even hundreds, who all have an area of expertise, but it's hodgepodge. And I was looking for a group with the right credentials that could say definitively, with expertise from within the military industrial system, to do be a one-stop shop for the president. And so we had a group that fit all of those criteria, and they evaluated everything and on that basis. And the third thing I said was, is there a system, if the first two questions are no, you You can't run the system with the existing machines. You can't modify the existing election system and have it be trustworthy with guarantee that you aren't going to have a problem where the vote can be frauded. The third question was, is there a system that we could buy and use and implement that's a machine system and end up with a safe vote for 2026? You know, if we could buy it, could it be implemented, trained, tested, certified in time nationwide for that? Because you have a bunch of different systems that are in play all across the country. Every county is a little different. You know, LA County, for example, largest county in the country, has its own election machine system that they built for themselves personally, but it's actually just a modified Smartmatic vote system, which has all sorts of issues. So you have all this hodgepodge of election systems around the country. That's why you have so many different experts with different things. And so I was asking a more generic question. Within that group, if that's not the case, said, what system could be used? Where the president's coming from and what he's been advised is you have to go to a hand count paper ballot. France, India, other countries don't trust any machines in the system. They do a nationwide ballot, and it's all counted and done. They just do it with smaller precincts, 1,500 or less, things like that is what we recommend here in the U.S. The way we used to do it, and then it's and you have a national election day, not weeks and months of voting. You know, like is going on even right now today with the early vote in New York and things like that, New Jersey. So with that in mind, I had asked for that. Within that group, they came up with answers, but then also added that they felt there was a tabulation system that they thought could be done with machines that would speed the process. And that got on President Trump's desk. And he saw that, and it violated what he already had said he wanted to do. It used a machine for some aspect of the vote, and he instantly was frustrated and discarded it. They don't understand that he did that for a reason. He wants no machines. My point of that whole story there right now, I don't care who you are as a group, how smart you are, how connected you are. At this point, he is of the opinion that in that specific group, that they were being opportunistic within what they were trying to do to go monetize and create a machine that they could, you know, make money off of when the nation is on the line and across the world. They just want to make a buck with their own latest patented thing that they think is going to help. They don't need that in India. They don't need it in France. And the president doesn't want any electronics. That's what he said. No machines anywhere in the system. If you have cameras to observe, but they have nothing to do with the vote count. They have nothing to do with the tabulation like that, except as a cross-reference after the fact. That's not the same. An observation system like the system that Mark Cook has, and the stuff that the Louisiana clothesline people are doing down in Louisiana have with cameras observing. That's not the same. You're not doing the count, the tallying, etc. With those cameras. They're just a cross-reference after the fact. And so the president rejected that. He is absolutely adamant. No machines at all anywhere in the election system. None. That's it. If you come to me with anything that has machines, it's a non-starter. He's going to sign. He said himself just a few days ago, he's going to sign an order concerning no mailing ballots and hand count paper ballots for the 2026 election. That is going to be federally supervised. Okay, you don't have to go with what I'm saying. That's what he said. He's days away from signing that executive order. Well, in the course of doing that, in order to enforce it within the executive order proposal we did, which was a 17-page proposal, he has to start with declaring a national emergency related to elections. And in the course of doing that, then imposing this down to the county level across the country, beyond just the state control. And in a national emergency, he can do that. Along with that, where states' laws and rights and everything else are involved, even though we had an agreement, an understanding, there was an agreement, understanding for how Tina was going to be released before or on her birthday, just a month ago. And that was intercepted by people in the Justice Department where the agreement was at, and stopped. And there was a certain logic that was applied, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to do something there. There's been stuff with whistleblower stuff like that. Trump has said 3 times he wants Tina free, but the circumstances under which she's free and the ability of the state to challenge that have been issues that within the Justice Department have been argued back and forth. And her legal counsel, who her attorney now is Peter Tickton, that Trennis Evans and I worked hard to come up with an understanding agreement, and he became her attorney. Lead attorney. Other attorneys stayed on the case. Within that mindset, there was a certain understanding she was going to be free. Well, it got short-stopped. And then we're still back at the habeas corpus. There's stuff that could be done at the federal level, but it would set a precedence that down in the future might work against us. And so there was a hesitation, as much as we want to do something to get Tina free, not to create a precedence that could be used against us at some later point in time by others that might come to power when President Trump's gone, let's say. So she's caught in the middle of all of this. Well, at the point that the president declares a national emergency related to elections, within that context, President Trump can take Tina out of Colorado's control related to the elections past and moving forward with her direct knowledge of certain aspects of the vote system. And she's an expert witness counsel for these things moving forward. And so if the court fails to act positively tomorrow in releasing Tina, which is a complete travesty, she presents no threat. This is she's a political prisoner. Everybody knows that. To make an example, to scare other people from moving forward in the election stuff. Point that the president enters into this, because we have the people that stole the 2020 election, the electronics, the machines. We have their testimony statements. We know what happened. We know everything. Trump knows everything related to that. Tina is a victim in this. He will act, and Tina will be free shortly. I'm absolutely confident of that. The circumstances, whether it's the court tomorrow, or as President Trump said, he's days away from signing the executive order. The executive order almost absolutely, he didn't say it, but almost absolutely, in order to enforce it, must include a national emergency related to the election. That gives him a clear, open field to break Tina free. And that is what I believe is going to happen. And then in the context of all of that, going after the way elections are conducted, we come back to what's going on in Utah next door to Colorado. You have a cabal, a private club, a group of people working together in a RICO, racketeer influence corrupt organization, to control who gets on the ballot and how, and that the people can even vote on in the first place. And so that effort is in play. Tracie has made this incredible case, 3,700 pages of in the filing, approximately, naming a dozen defendants in this RICO conspiracy case. They're still serving them, concerning how the elections in Utah are conducted and have been conducted by this little club against the interests of Utah citizens and, by the way, of U.S. citizens, because the governor of Utah is out making agreements with foreign nations on trade and relationship and money spending and all sorts of things. That's U.S. taxpayer dollars, not just Utah. And they're spending U.S. money, federal money, on their little operation inside of Utah for their own little stuff. And it's not just the governor, it's a U.S. senator who got there. He also shouldn't have been on the ballot. It's all stuff that I'll let Tracie answer for you, but it's a racket. And they control the elections with their little insider sleight of hand like magicians, not just in Utah, but in Colorado also. And so I believe that before it's all done, we'll need to have a RICO in Colorado, a RICO in Hawaii, where they had a meeting yesterday and nobody, after 5 hours, could explain how 19,000 mail-in ballots, which didn't go through the postal system, were counted in Hawaii's last election. Okay, how's that happen? It's a racket. And the courts are in on it. The courts don't let you get to justice, just like they aren't letting Tina get to justice in Colorado. They're not letting the people in Utah get to justice. That's why Tracie had to file a federal suit. So, Tracie, did I say it right, or did I miss anything, or tell me what I got right and wrong there?
No, you got it right. That's exactly what's going on. And I do agree with you. Every state will probably have a RICO case because it is racketeering, corrupt organization. And that's why they got Tina. Is the dissent, even our lieutenant governor went after Tina on social media. She said, like, to try to scare people, and said she got what she deserves, and it was terrible what our lieutenant governor said about her, and that is totally why they did it.
Yeah, I mean, these we had Jenna Griswold just came out and said something very similar. Again, the hypocrisy there is pretty wild. And you're free to jump in if you want to add something, Juan, but I do want Tracie, if you could give your elevator pitch. There's a lot here, and I want to give you time to go through it. So I don't want to guidepost it. So if you want to jump in, because this is a huge lawsuit, and I just, before you go in, I want to recommend everybody go to utahcorruption.com. That'll be linked in the description, so please check it out. You can find all the exhibits, and it's where all the information, all the work that she's been doing, and the details of this case live there. So make sure you check out the website after you're done listening to Tracie.
And do you mind if we pull that
signing on as plaintiff? By the way, every person in this audience can be a plaintiff in this case, and the number is critical to force the federal involvement in this, and to let the Utah judges know that their mischief, even if they're a federal judge, isn't going to go unnoticed. So everybody needs. You got what? How many plaintiffs in the case right now? Do you have 3,000 something?
Yeah, it's over 3,000 right now. If you don't mind, we could pull it up, and we can kind of go through it and show the people how to sign up. And this is a grassroots movement. I have always believed that it's we the people that are going to save this country, because I think that's who saved it first. And let's see. I don't know how I can.
Well, not even just saved it, but established it against royalist tyranny. To every man a sovereign, every man king of his own household. No more sovereigns reigning over us, telling us whether you can hunt that day or if you can have your own crops in your own field that you tended. Slime balls.
Right.
Well, and Tracie, I have this is on the main page for everybody who's watching on Utah Corruption. If you scroll down just past the exhibits, you have the information that I have up right now where you can apply. If you want me to pull up the suit or a specific exhibit, just let me know and I'll follow your lead.
Okay, so just exit out of that and go up, like, the start at the beginning, and we can go through that. Yeah, so here is Utah Corruption, and you can join our class action by clicking that and filling that out. like Juan said, the more the better, because it will put pressure on the federal involvement on this case, because we are going to join the United States government as a plaintiff because they guaranteed us a representative form of government, and we don't have one. We actually don't even have elected in there. So the donate to the legal fund, that is to help. It is a grassroots movement. We don't have a lot of money, and our complaint, as Juan mentioned, it is total, I think it was 42,000 sheets of paper for all 12 defendants.
Double-sided too, printed on both sides.
Yeah, and we weighed it. We wanted to weigh it, so it was 20 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Because we want them to feel the weight of what they have done to the people of Utah, but also the people of the United States, because we have a sitting senator that was not elected by us. He was appointed by the oligarchs or the pirates. And we wanted them to feel how heavy it was. And we've got them all served as of today.
Oh,
Yeah. We were chasing one of them in the Capitol today to try to catch them. But we got them all served today.
well,
so.
that was actually at a the police were all there, the sheriffs, everybody were there, and you had to go through the guardians and get to that person to serve them. Right there,
Yep.
in the midst of it all.
Yeah. It was wild, but it is really we the people. It's a movement.
Well, let me add one thing here before you get further into this, Tracie. That just so everybody knows, and we've been talking about this all the way back to last year when Phil Lyman. You know, I talked with Phil before he ever decided to run for governor, and he had other people ask him. He'd considered it, and I spent flew out and spent better part of a day with him walking through the logistics, and he finally said, okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and run. And some people stepped forward there in Utah and decided to back him, and that was outstanding. But so I've been kind of there with Phil from the very beginning before he ever announced. And this is, by the way, Phil Lyman, who ran for governor. He had been pardoned by President Trump on a BLM thing, another racket thing. They tried to shut his voice up during Trump's first term. But with all that in mind, when the time finally came where Tracie was trying to tell people at the state convention that they couldn't do what they were planning on doing, they threatened her with arrest, kind of like Tina. They tried to intimidate her and threaten her with arrest and sent the police. And all she was doing was pointing out what the law says and trying to get consideration. So they attacked her. We've talked and talked and talked along this, and then she has some legal experience and background. She's not just anybody trying to figure this out. She's got some legal history that helped her. And so to prepare a pro se was a task, but it wasn't like it would be for most people because she had some understanding of the law. So for over 8 months now, Tracie has been working. She's got a family, husband, who himself is a victim.
Yeah.
Who's been actually, let me just add this, the spouses of so many of the people that are in this fight have to be considered, because when they help their partner through some of this stuff, it has huge costs, including interaction time, raising the kids and like that. So this was a major undertaking, commitment for Tracie to do, but they did try to set her up for arrest and drama, just like with Tina in its own lane. And so she fought back. And so the suit that you see, the 92-page complaint plus the 92 exhibits, which take up this rest of this huge body, the evidence, which is not insignificant, huge volume of evidence, proving what she says in her complaint. That was no minor thing. Tracie was hard at it. So even, let me just make a quick appeal. It's not self-serving for you say it, I'll say it. Tracie put out her own money, her own time, everything to get this put together and file it. Anybody that makes a little donation, I think there's 3,000 in donations have happened so far. I think she was looking for 5,000 to kind of cover the costs, the physical costs up to this point in time, the printing, the time, we've had volunteers. Every one of those complaints, the 12 complaints there, to those that were served had to be exactly right, all in order, printed, and putting it together was a week plus there anyway. The physical complaints to be served on people after the court accepted the case. A little love there to help cover those expenses, I know will be greatly appreciated, and it's already been spent. You're just putting some money back in her family's pocket to cover what she's already done, and that's not for the time, it's just for the physical expense and other filings that are going to come that are part of this case too. So, participating in that way for those of you that can, God sees, he knows that you're in there, and we want to shoulder up with you. So, just so you know, Tracie, I think people in the audience, especially Tina's audience, understand, and showing that this is not just in Colorado, that this system, this club that are stopping the citizens from being able to have their voice heard, these tyrants, these pirates are in multiple states. These pirates have hijacked the helm of the ship of state of Colorado and are running it in places that the people of Colorado en masse don't agree with and aren't on board with the way that they've done stuff. Yeah, there's pirates have gotten in control of Colorado through crooked elections, and that's what Tina found. Pirates have hijacked the ship of state within the fleet here in the United States. Of many states, the helm of the ships of these states have been stolen through election fraud, and people are running them in places and in ways that we cannot agree with. And so you've pointed that out there in Utah. That's what this suit is about, is taking back control of the helm of the ship of state, where they have, through election fraud, through chicanery, election magic, of taken and steered it off in ways that the people of Utah have never envisioned, planned on, desired, and we're going to take it back. So anyway, sorry, I just, let's help you out with a few bucks, and I'll be doing that myself also, Tracie.
Thank you, Juan. I do think it's important that we go back to the website, if you don't mind pulling that up, so we can just go through the sections, just so people know what and how to find the case and then in the information. So after the donate legal fund, you can scroll down. There's already 3,046 class action members. And then this section under Utah's election system under fire, that is the section that tells the story. There is a unique little clique here in Utah that is controlling our elections, and they're preferred candidates because they pass the certain election or certain laws that benefit them, that either benefit their businesses or their family, and it's just funneling money back to each other. And so what they did is they used this signature trick to make people think that they could gather signatures and get a second chance at the election. And the law does not say that.
Well, let me back you up for a second, because I think we're talking to a lot of people who may not understand this, and it's worth taking a moment to understand the context of what happened. And by the way, why did they have to have Cox? Cox was the sitting governor in Utah. Cox had already committed himself to bringing in the Olympics back to Salt Lake City again for a second time. And so this clique of money people knew that they could get federal and international money for their little building projects, their land projects, all sorts of things, amongst other things. If they got the Olympics back in there, they had to have Cox, because he was an insider, to make sure the right people got the contracts, got this money. And Cox, the people of Utah, were not that excited about him coming into the 2024 election. So what happened is, the proper sequence in Utah is that you have a caucus system, which people gather in their homes all across the state. People hold a caucus from the neighborhood in somebody's home, and or a facility like a school or something like that, and then they hear the information from the candidates that are running for particular offices, and then they do a vote. You have a Democrat caucus, you have a Republican caucus. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Right. Let me just make that a little bit more clear. So it's a caucus and a convention system. So the caucus is where the neighborhood gets together and you elect a delegate. And then that delegate goes on to the primary convention where they get to select their nominee. And you're right, it's every party. It doesn't matter which party it is. It's every party. This is how they pick their nominee to be on the
This is by state law. This is by state law. The state runs the caucus system, right?
Right. They delegate the caucus convention system to nominate your candidate to the political parties. They delegate that out. And
right. So you have a
official.
caucus, and the caucus in somebody's living room, everybody votes.
Or like school, like you said.
Yeah. At whatever location, a neighborhood community of voters elect a representative for their caucus, which is their delegate.
Yep.
And appoints them to represent the neighborhood for their party's candidacy. And any political party has a caucus system. They can do the Democrats, Republicans, by state law. But the state actually, and this is kind of an important detail here, the state actually provides the facility of the location and manages that location for the party to conduct its business of electing through the delegates, electing a representative for the party as their nominee for political office. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, and it's a purest form of representative form of government that there can be. And you'll see that signature trick. I explained it.
Well, hold on. Not to the signature yet. Hold on a second.
Okay.
In the state primary convention, where all the delegates go, and in this case in 2024, Utah had about 4,000 people representing 4,000 caucus meetings around the state, neighborhoods all through the state, the cities, the counties, the local stuff. So 4,000 people drive from across the state to show up at the state convention for the Republican convention. They get hotels, gas, meals, the whole schmear, bring family members, whatever. But they all show up for the state convention. And then as the law allows, they elect who their representative person that as a party, the Republican Party in this case, wants to be the candidate in the general election in the fall. And if, according to state law, in any of these votes, convention primary votes, if a candidate gets 60% or more of the delegates' vote, they go straight to the general election. There's no runoff. They're strong enough that it's the belief within the state law that they would most likely win a general primary election. And so it's a big plus for them. They don't have to spend money continuing to campaign to win their party's nomination. If they get 60% or more of the vote at the convention, it's overwhelming enough. Even if there was only one other candidate, and there's usually multiple, if they got 40% of the vote, they'd have to get half again more of what they had to, beat them. It's just believed that there's no further need to do it, and they don't have to spend campaign money. So it's an incentive for the party to present a strong candidate so that they're not wasting money on a primary election. They can go straight to the general election and put all of their resources, all of their volunteers to winning in the general election. And that's the incentive. So if you get 60% or more at the convention, you're the automatic party candidate for that position. Well, in this case, Bill Lyman, how much did he get? 65 something, 67?
67%, over just over 67%, and Trent Staggs got almost 70%.
And that's for the U.S. Senator.
Mm-hmm.
And so 70%, okay. And what did Cox get in the convention? Do you remember what the number was he actually got of convention votes?
It was 30 something percent, but he was disqualified. And same with John Curtis. They were disqualified. We had our nominee. I know.
Well, yeah, at the convention, they were not able to get enough votes to push Lyman below 60%. So at the moment that Lyman got more than 60%, and he actually got 67, he was the Republican nominee for the general election for the governor of the state of Utah. And there was no need for any further campaigning or anything. The existing governor of Utah was disqualified from being the Republican nominee in any way, shape, or form in the general election. There's no mechanism at that point that Cox could legally be the on the election as the Republican candidate for the governor of Utah. The same thing holds true for Curtis with the U.S. senator from Utah. They had lost. There's no further anything. But the lieutenant governor had also, with Cox, not got enough votes to be on the general election. Yet in Utah, explain that for us. There's no Secretary of State. The lieutenant governor doesn't. If I look at anybody who's the real criminal in this, and I mean real criminality, it is the lieutenant governor with what she did next. And then you get into this 28,000, and I'll let you handle it.
Reading through these documents, the conflict of interest and some of the things that the lieutenant governor was doing, Deirdre, was just wild. I mean, yeah. It's pretty cut and dry because the percentages are there, and this is like a bylaw issue. The actual deal 2024 is very straightforward. But sorry, go ahead, Tracie.
No, that's okay. And yeah, she usurped her authority and put the names of the disqualified candidates that were disqualified at convention, and then she put those names on the ballot.
Phil Lyman, Trent Stagg, they are at the convention nominated as the Republican candidates decisively, not just 51%, but 67 and 70%. The other people, because it's over 60%, there is no further need for any more vote or anything. They go straight to the general ballot. They're on the fall election ballot. That's the way it is. But the lieutenant governor is, one of the people that's going to be elected in this fall election. And what she does, because she runs the election, you don't have a Secretary of State, which is a problem in Utah. It needs to be corrected. You need to put back in a Secretary of State. It's a flawed system. She says, okay, we're going to go ahead and have a second chance, a second bite at the apple. And they hire a company that nobody in the public knows it at the time, but that company gets $1 million to do a sign-in. And allegedly, if they can get 28,000 people to sign that they want Cox and Curtis and the lieutenant governor to be able to be the candidates, on the ballot, they can get on the ballot for the statewide election. But here's the other thing that everybody has to keep in mind. First off, the 28,000 never happened. The legislature looked at the people that this crooked company had signed on as though there were 28,000 people. The company's under investigation has since admitted that a number of their people put false signatures on these sign-ins on other elections and have been prosecuted for that. On this specific election, the judges are all crooked, wouldn't let us go look at it, but the legislature looked at these 28,000 people that would supposedly allow Cox and Curtis and the lieutenant governor to be on the ballot in the fall election. The legislature looked at those signatures and they just took a percentage, I think it was 10%. And they looked, and based on an examination of 10%, they determined that it was almost certain that, without a doubt, Cox had not, this signature gathering drive had not gotten valid signatures from citizens, and therefore they couldn't have been placed on the ballot. This was all argued in the courts, argued in the public in the summer of 2024, but nothing came of it.
Right. But I want to make it very clear that those signatures never applied.
Right. And so even that was a fraud. And I think that's where it was a flawed process, even if it hadn't been fraud with the signatures being valid. The process itself was never valid. The state law is that if you get 60 or more % of the vote at convention, you are the candidate for that office for that party. And that's the way it is. So this whole thing that the lieutenant governor did was a fraud on its face upon another fraud, that they got these votes, which never happened. They didn't have enough. And then, based on this alleged vote fraud of the 28,000 signatures, then, and this is where the real crime that I actually think somebody's got to go to jail over occurred in Utah. It wasn't the flawed process and the flawed vote stuff, but you could make the argument that Cox could, if he had the 28,000 signatures, have been on the ballot as a candidate. That Curtis could have been on the ballot as a candidate, but you couldn't make them the Republican Party candidate for that office.
And I want to argue that, though, Juan, because when they declared their candidacy, they declared they were seeking the Republican nominee. And this doesn't matter what party lines. You can design whatever way you want to in this convention process. So it's not just Republican. But once they said that they were seeking it that way, once they were disqualified, they were done. They could only do a write-in candidacy. So that was it. The signatures didn't matter.
Right. And so the core of this whole thing for me is this. Dieter, who was the lieutenant governor, in violation of Utah state law, in violation of the party vote, put Cox and herself down as the Republican candidates for governor and lieutenant governor, and Curtis as the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate, against the convention process. And even with this second bite, there's no possible way, no matter how you slice it, that you can get away from the fact that the Republican Party candidates for those offices were the people that won at convention. And no matter how you might have got them on the ballot elsewise as a write-in or anything like that, fine, go do it. But you're not the Republican candidate for governor. You're just a write-in candidate for governor. And the whole situation was reversed, because when Dieter put herself and Cox and Curtis on the ballot as the Republican candidates for the governor, lieutenant governor, and for U.S. Senate, she did so in spite of the convention process, a state-run supervised operation. She frauded not just the candidates, but the people of Utah, and everything that those people have done since they got into office is fraudulent, is criminal against not just the citizens of Utah, but the citizens of the United States, because they are not in office lawfully. They were put on as Republican candidates, and they were not. And the convention was nullified as though it never happened. Well, by state law, you have a convention. The laws protect the way that a party picks its nominee. And they violated the party process that is written in state law and the 60% number They just completely ignored it as though it never, ever happened. There is no legal basis for what the lieutenant governor did operating in a Secretary of State type capacity. She created a ballot that was a total fraud against Utah law, against the will of the delegates who represent the rest of the population. And so now you don't have representative government. You have cabal government. These were the selected ones, not the elected ones. And in the context of they needed these people in there to get the Olympics in there and do a lot of spending for a bunch of rich guys behind the scenes.
Right. And the legislature, when they created the signature gathering process, it's just a vehicle that they use to do the fraud, but they have no business telling a party how to pick their nominee. They just are supposed to say they can require a primary, yes, which is the convention process, but they can't say that you have to use signature gathering. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Green Party, Constitutional Party. It doesn't matter. They had no business even forcing that upon us. So the signature gathering process is just their vehicle that they used to do the fraud. They said, oh, I can gather signatures and that makes me a valid candidate. And that was not right. They do not have that authority and they could not force that upon our party. And the reason why they picked the Republican Party is because we're the gorilla in the state. Like we have 900,000, I think Phil pointed that out. 900,000 members of it. So it's really hard to get past that a Republican
or for a Democrat or any other party.
Right.
Yeah,
so the rhinos took over us. They've taken us over.
Yeah. It's considered a Republican state, a red state.
Yeah. And
so, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just, I think it's important to point out that for many of the conservatives listening to the show here, it seems at odds. In fact, we've gotten pushback from lots of people on this lawsuit as though you're going after Republicans. That's wrong. You shouldn't do anything against the party. Look, these people are rhinos. They're breaking the law. They could care less about the law. They're there through fraud, trickery, chicanery. I don't care what label you put on them. They don't represent us. They're not our team. We're not going to get into office that way, and we don't want people getting into office on that basis. They frauded their way into office. The other candidates for office were also Republicans. And that all the money, the donations, the people that did the campaign donations for Phil and for Trent, they had their rights too. This isn't about party politics. This is about justice. This is about seeing to it that people that actually represent us get into office. These were selected people. They owe something to somebody behind the scenes. They're there because they're promising their friend, their buddy, to make sure they get their slice of the pie, and that's why they got help to get into office. And it's a fraud against all of us as citizens. It's not just Utah; it's across the country. And similarly, there need to be similar lawsuits, including in Colorado. I believe there will be. I mean, we're talking behind the scenes with several people on this. I think it's going to have to be done in a number of states. So even the website, I've been so happy with the name you guys chose for the website, utahcorruption.com, because you could really use that exact terminology in every state, and or something very similar to that, and it tells the whole story just in the name of the site. It's all about corruption, racketeer, influence, corrupt organizations. The corruption doesn't, mean just a crime. This is families, group working together, secret handshake behind the scenes to control who gets into office and then how we're managed. These are tyrants. These are pirates who have hijacked the ship of state, of many states in this fleet out across America. And that's why before it's over, the commander of the fleet is going to have to take control of how the elections are done. And that's why we're going to have an emergency a national emergency related to elections and take control of how these votes are handled, these processes
Right.
are handled. So,
And to prove that point, when they put their names, those disqualified candidates, and this includes our Utah Attorney General, when they placed those names on the ballot, it created a counterfeit ballot, and then they put it in the mail. So it created mail fraud. So I don't know what state would even want to even risk them making a mistake or something, but these people deliberately put their names on this ballot and try to convince the people of Utah that they were valid candidates, and they weren't. They were disqualified. So they created a counterfeit ballot and then they put it in the mail and committed mail fraud. And then they took to social media and email and tried to convince everybody that they were valid candidates, and that created wire fraud. And that's where you get your RICO. And I'm sure it's happening in other states. They're using the mail system to take over our elections, and it's mail fraud. And so I say, let's hold them to it.
well, and beyond that, you have federal offices that are covered here, like with the U.S. Senator. It's not localized to just the state. People have to understand that this has impact in the way money is spent, who makes the decisions, both nationally and internationally, with these positions. So the rest of us, our vote is diluted because somebody is in office. How many Senate votes are won or lost by one vote? Okay.
Right.
And let alone stuff over in the House and like that. So if you have multiple states, especially the low population states, Oregon, Hawaii, Alaska, Utah, you're cheap dates. Why? Because with a minimal amount of money investment, you can control and influence an election, and you get a U.S. senator or a U.S. representative that throws the balance off in Congress. If you had a true representative, there's a number of votes that have already happened. For example, say with Curtis, or things that Cox has done, that had you had Phil Lyman or Trent in there, would have gone differently and affected the course of the country. And then you start adding in, and oh, by the way, you question who's the U.S. senator out of Alaska or Hawaii or Oregon, other things, and how would they vote? You've now flipped the course of the whole country with what appears to be just a outlier election of a low population state. But they have influence, just like a representative or a senator from California or New York, even though, so it's a cheap date. It's easy to get a lot done if you can just focus on a few states. And of course, that's why some of these organizations are so powerful, so strong, offering so much behind the scenes to the various candidates and political parties to let them get away with it in stealing control of and pirating control of these states. The battleship's the same size as New York's battleship, yet it's easier to lower crew on the battleship, so these pirates come on and they pick the weak ones that still have the same firepower as everybody else.
Yeah, and Utah gets $7 billion from federal money, and they're pushing these leftist policies. They may say that we're Republican and that we're red. We're not. That's the laws that are being passed by the state legislature. It's harming. It's harming the entire United States. I mean,
Yep.
Cox is running around making these deals with international leaders and sending missiles to Ukraine and building Ukraine missiles and getting those there. I mean, we are hurting the United States, and that's why this is to me, it's a national emergency, because we have a rogue governor who's not even elected by the people, not a representative, and he is making these deals for the establishment. It's the rhinos are making the establishment. And we often call them now steak dinner Republicans, because they offered a stake and $1,000 for someone to run in as a write-in against Phil Lyman. They were just blazingly doing this in front of us.
Yeah, they found somebody with the same name, Phil Lyman, and they offer him a steak dinner if he'll put himself on as the candidate. So at the last minute, the last hour that you could sign on as a governor candidate, they put this guy in white because Phil Lyman was going to have to go on as a write-in. completely against the law based on what happened, but the lieutenant governor's, running a scam. And so to further dilute, they get a second Phil Lyman. So, which Phil Lyman are you voting for? If you right, they didn't get to add a middle initial, whatever. They were trying to confuse. They were afraid of Phil Lyman, even as a write-in. Got 200,000 people that wrote his name on the ballot as a write-in because they hated what was going on that bad. It's the largest write-in in U.S. history, I believe.
Yes, it is. And even then, the state dinner, Lyman quit right before the end of the election. So a lot of people thought he dropped out. So they didn't vote for him.
That's the
So
real
he would have even
dropped
got
out.
more.
Yeah.
It's really disgusting. Yeah. And it's really important that everybody go and check out that website. It's the people that helped me create that. They are wonderful people, and it shows all the exhibits. And there's an amicus brief now from another attorney that is on there that's supporting
Fleming.
the plaintiffs.
Dr. Fleming, who's
Dr.
also
Fleming.
an attorney. Yes. And there's going to be more. We've got other people that are working on their own amicus briefs. And by the way, just so people understand, if you remember when Trump was on the ballot in Colorado, and then they said that Trump couldn't be on the ballot because he was a felon because of the New York scams that were being run, part of this larger national racket. So Colorado was the first up and said Trump can't be on the ballot in the state of Colorado as the presidential candidate for the Republican Party because of his conviction in New York. And so Trump's legal team fought in the courts in Colorado to overturn that and allow President Trump to be on the ballot in Colorado in the 2024 election cycle. Because it was an emergency, because the election was coming up, it was treated as an emergency. When all the courts in Colorado and the appeals in Colorado were completed, and the decision of the judges in Colorado was that Trump could be removed from the ballot, and so the action of the Secretary of State to remove Trump from the ballot was valid. Then it went on an emergency basis to the federal courts and all the way to the Supreme Court. At the Supreme Court, Trump's attorneys made their presentation, their complaint, their arguments for the Supreme Court. Then other Americans offered amicus briefs. And the court was asked to consider the arguments in the amicus briefs. At the end, when the decision was made that Trump can be forced to be on the ballot in Colorado against the state's judges' decisions and the Secretary of State's decision to remove Trump from the ballot. They said, nope, you got to put him on the ballot. But then they cited in the decision, they cited not one thing from Trump's attorneys, his legal team's presentation about why he should be kept on the ballot. It was a couple of the amicus briefs got it right, but one had all 5 aspects that the Supreme Court decided the case on. And that was the legal brief presented by Tracie Halvorsen, who is now on the board at the American Rights Alliance, which Peter Tickton and Don Jr. Put together. And so Tracie Halvorsen is now over there, but he, with his little team, a non-attorney, pro se guy, put together an amicus brief as a non-attorney pro se guy that went to the Supreme Court, and the court used his as almost the cut and paste version for their decision that Trump had to be on the ballot in Colorado. So with that in mind, even in what you have, Tracie, these amicus briefs can be helpful because they bring in issues that, even with what you've considered and presented within your case, may not ultimately even be the primary things that the courts will want to consider. Right now, it's there at the federal courts, but there's aspects of your case that may very well end up at the Supreme Court of the United States before this is all over. And so these amicus briefs are helpful for the court to decide and frame ultimately their decisions that may come in this matter.
Yeah,